The Tom Oberheim Two-Voice Pro is an exquisite, fully analog two-voice synthesizer. It is at its heart an eminently playable synthesizer, featuring a 37-key velocity-sensitive keyboard with aftertouch, a pitch bend wheel and assignable modulation wheel, and of course, knobs to control every function of the synth voices for countless forms of real-time expressive control. Full MIDI implementation allows you to both play the synth from another MIDI keyboard or MIDI sequencer, as well as use the Two-Voice Pro's keyboard to play other MIDI instruments. The Two-Voice Pro also features a 2-track, 16-step mini sequencer, which can be synced to both MIDI clock and transport, keeping it in perfect sync with your DAW or external sequencer of choice. A full complement of patch points allow you to both patch the Two-Voice Pro internally to achieve more advanced synthesis functions and modulation options, as well as interface with other CV gear in your studio, such as Eurorack modular equipment. At the heart of the Two-Voice Pro are two identical Tom Oberheim synthesizer expander modules, or SEMs for short. The SEM is a powerful and sonically rich monophonic synth voice in its own right, featuring two fully analog VCOs, both sweepable between pulse width and sawtooth waveforms. Both VCOs also have attenuable modulation for either frequency or pulse width. The modulation source for each VCO can be set to the voice's two internal envelopes, the voice's LFO, or the external CV input. Patching in external sources here can be used for functions such as FM synthesis, or control of pulse width by an external Eurorack LFO, for example. The SEM module also features a variable mode analog filter, which is sweepable between low-pass and high-pass settings, with a classic notch filter resulting from a 50% setting. The filter can also be switched into Bandpass mode. There are knobs to control both cutoff frequency and resonance of the filter, as well as a modulation attenuator to control the amount of modulation affecting the filter from the three assignable sources: envelope 2, the module's LFO, or the external CV input. Each SEM also features two individual envelopes and an LFO, which, as we've seen, can be used to modulate functions of both the VCOs and the filter. The Two-Voice Pro's 37-key velocity and aftertouch sensitive keyboard can be used to play the two SEM voices in a variety of ways. These different play modes can be accessed via the keyboard and MIDI module. The default behavior of the synth is to round robin between the two voices. Of course, two voices can be played at the same time, in which case both notes will sound concurrently. Selecting SEM-A first will result in SEM-B only being triggered if another note is already being held down. This can be useful for some unique playable effects. Unison Mode will have both SEMs respond to every note, stacking them together. This allows for very thick detuned bass sounds, or rich chords. Split Mode allows each SEM to be played by a different section of the keyboard. Retrigger will allow notes played while a key is held to send a new gate signal. Legato behavior can be achieved by pressing either unison or split a second time. The selection LED will flash, indicating that the legato mode is enabled. To the left of the keyboard is the bend box, featuring the pitch and mod wheels. The keyboard can also be transposed here for one or both SEMs. The keyboard on the Two-Voice Pro can be set to turn local control off. In this mode, notes played on the keyboard will not trigger the SEMs, but will output 8-note polyphonic MIDI via the MIDI out. This means you can use the Two-Voice Pro's keyboard to play other MIDI devices, or even use it as the centerpiece of your studio. One of the most powerful features of the Two-Voice Pro is the 2-track 16-step mini-sequencer module. Using the rotary knobs, sequences of up to 16 steps can be created with one track dedicated to each SEM. The keyboard can be used to transpose either sequence or both sequences. Sequences can also be edited step by step by using the forward and backward buttons. Gate length can be adjusted, steps can be set to rests, or steps can be set to ratchet between 2 and 4 times. Ratcheting means the note will be triggered the number of times specified in the space of the step being set to ratchet. Press ratchet 2 for 2 triggers. Ratchet 3 for 3 triggers. Or select both ratchet 2 and ratchet 3 for 4 triggers. Sequences can also be input via the keyboard. In order to do this, press the Shift button in addition to either the Sequence Edit A or B buttons. Now, notes played on the keyboard will cycle through the steps of the sequence, with the light progressing through the steps to indicate notes being recorded. When all notes are recorded, the first LED will illuminate. The Two-Voice Pro has 2 1/4-inch outputs. Each SEM is able to be leveled and panned via the SEM Outputs section. By panning one SEM to the left and one SEM to the right, the 2 outputs effectively become mono outputs for each SEM. There are also 2 1/4-inch external inputs and 1/4-inch outputs for the CV and gate from each SEM. Along the top of the Two-Voice Pro is an array of patch points for 3.5mm cables. With a few of these cables, we can do some interesting things. For example, we can patch the mod wheel output into a mult to split it, and then patch the signal to the filter cutoff for both SEM modules. Now we have mod wheel control of our filter cutoff. Here's another example of how we can use the semi-modular nature of the Two-Voice Pro to expand its sonic capabilities. Let's take the pulse width output of oscillator 1 from SEM-A and route it to the CV of oscillator 2. Now we've added frequency modulation, or FM synthesis, to the arsenal of sounds at our disposal with the Two-Voice Pro. If you're already a modular user, the possibilities become exponential. The Two-Voice Pro is as happy in the most cable-laden, sequencer-heavy studio as it is being played on stage. We've only really scratched the surface of what's possible with the Tom Oberheim Two-Voice Pro. Between the rich, classic, and eminently playable analog tones it creates, and the open, expandable nature of the available patch points, the Two-Voice Pro is a sonic powerhouse in any performing or producing environment.